This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for products, and FowlLibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists.
As well as our guest lecturer members King Pearlshine, Vite Ramen, Mognite, and Darren Noblock.
Class is in session.
All right, guys, let us take a look at the rulerschooltcg.com. That is where you're going to find all of this different tournament data, and I'm going to show you how to get there today because we are taking a look at the recent Odyssey Games Ruler School Circuit, which happened on March 10th, 2024. These are the top 8, and hey, look at that. We are here. So again, that's that, guys, is tournaments right here at the top. That's a really good way to get into these different tournament results for you today. Just because we don't have a ruler breakdown here doesn't mean we didn't have a ruler breakdown at all. We had about 13 players, and so you are going to be looking at the only K3 deck to make it at this time. This is, wow, very fun to see that Wolves made Kaguya, Friend from Another World, actually fun to see it being played. So congratulations to Ivan for just taking home the championship mat at the end of the day. Let's take a look at what he's got going on. So Friend from Another World Kaguya is really solid. Every time a moon comes into the field, you're going to be drawing a card. So every moon cantrips, which is very, very helpful, especially in today's environment where card advantage is becoming a little bit more relevant, especially if you need to see particular things like your Lone Wolf of the Crimson Moon. Very important card to see if you want to be aggressive. Otherwise, you can just play a normal mid-range game of Force of Will using things like Dark Alice, using things like your Mana Dork here that gets produces you more will as the game goes through it and you have more moons. Godly Aura to burn something or just make a moon on the end step of your opponent's turn, netting you, I believe, 2 cards. This card is very good in this very particular arrangement here. We do have Tinkerbell and the Spirit of the Crimson Moon to get rid of things like additions or regalia, and then blow up the rest of the field in addition to that for 1 will, which is really, really helpful. Chivalry's Tears to burn and take things if you kill them, which is really nice, as well as Light Curtain as a way of fueling your replicant Nyarlathotep, who does make you moons, and because she comes into the field and makes you moons, you are going to be drawing off of those moons coming into the field. If you end up solarizing her, you get a lot more moons and a lot more cards. She's very much a bomb in this deck right next to Electra. In addition to that, we have Keep the Faith, which is a really good way of bringing back either your Dark Alice, your Crimson Wolves, or even your moon-producing wolves here, as well as Magic Stone Dance of Chaos. We were very confused as to why this card was printed until we saw Wolfstone. Wolfstone does indeed count as a moon entering the field, which means it draws you a card, it brings your wolves back in. It's kind of nuts how good this card is, especially if you're looking for a particular way to reanimate your wolves. Those stones then go back to the bottom of the deck, allowing you to use them again at some point. So that's really helpful to have this card in particular in the deck. Next to that, we have some anti-meta picks with Girl Staring At, and then Death Scythe. Death Scythe is probably really good right now, mostly because of things like Abdul, Alice coming in with Imperishable. Now she doesn't have that. It's really, really helpful. Abdul will not gain Imperishable either, so you can just kill him outright with something like a Chivalry's Tears or a Godly Aura. Things like that to be able to just get rid of him, blow him up with Tinkerbell. It's really, really helpful to just have things available to you to get rid of Abdul as needed. Although I probably wouldn't play Tinkerbell against Abdul just because, you know, enter effects don't trigger and stuff. Anyway, let's just keep moving on here. The stone deck is obviously 4 of the Magic Wolf Stone. This is a really good way of making sure that your main win condition can continue to come into the deck. It's a very easy package to slot in at this point. 4 of the Foresee Stones and 2 Heat Rays to make sure that you have consistent white-red access at all times. You have Crimson Moon in the sideboard, a second Electra, 2 more Death Scythe and Attack Order. This deck really does not like to see Grim Rulers being played. A couple of Phoenix phoenixes. I'm not really sure if this is entirely necessary, but they're here. A couple more girls staring at, and a rogue spectator is really helpful, and then Exorcist Mage. I think this card is actually going to be a really good pick for white lists going into the future. So congratulations to Ivan for getting first place against Tyler Tompkins, who was on Grim and Alice. So the Grim Alice deck is a really strong control deck. It recycles very well. It has ways of maintaining itself in grind games like this. It also has ways to do pretty degenerate things, like using Never End to turn your deck into fairy tales, so then you can use your pop-up book to grab Tell a Fairy Tale from the deck, play that card, grab an Electra or grab a Hook, and do whatever you want to do. The deck is very fun in that sense. I'm actually looking at potentially putting this deck together in some form, because I've always loved the Grim deck idea, but other decks were calling my name, so this will be my fun list outside of things. And it also happens to be very meta relevant, very good, all at the same time. So the deck is really just trying to use Grim's effect to discard things like your fairy tales, to get things to hand, gain a bunch of life at this stage because of his regalia, which is really strong. And then you have several win conditions in Never End, Electra, Hook, or even just outplaying your opponent. Is very strong. He is playing a couple of Liberation of the Light here, which I think is a really good way of answering things like Abdul, especially when you can just pop your own imperishable Alice to pop their stuff, which is really helpful. In addition to that, he is playing a couple of Death Scythe in the sideboard, so being able to turn off his opponent's Alice in games 2 and 3 is really important, so that they just can't do anything with that card and get any value anymore, which I think is a really good step. Of course, he's playing a couple of Lorites, Girl in the City, Girl Staring At, all of these like really helpful, really good cards. Light Curtains to do some removal shenanigans. There's just a lot of good stuff going on with this deck. Magic Stone deck, of course, you are a Grim deck, so you get access to things like Moonshades, but then you also get the new Pure Heart Stone, which is just gas for the entire deck. If you want Omni Stones, here are Omni Stones. He was playing 3 of the Amadeus Crystal. I think this card is probably going to be switched up here pretty soon. Against Singleton Rulers, this card is not going to be nearly as good. We already have things spoiled like Lucy and Leica that are going to be really powerful, so this card may not be seeing much use in the Stone deck from here on out, but we do have things like a 4th Moonshade we can just slot in at any time. We can also just slot in Light Vapors or the Foresee Stone that acts as Light Vapors, just to kind of make this a little bit more accessible. But I think Amadeus Stone, especially in my match against Tyler, proved that it wasn't super anti-helpful against him. The side deck is pretty standard. You're going to be seeing things like, again, Exorcist Mage, Falling into the Crack of Time, Death Scythe, anti-search cards like Witch, and then Attack Order. And then if you're looking at Devotee and you're not sure what that card facilitates, it's nothing. It's really just a calling card for Tyler. He loves this card to death, and so he plays this card in his side deck as a one-of. Love the man. So there we go. One Freyla's Devotee for those Freyla stands out there. Congratulations to Tyler for getting 2nd place, and let's move on to 3rd place with Christian Mitt. Christian has the Solaria list that topped. This is not going to be the last Solaria list you see. It's actually kind of a surprise that it did as well as it did in this tournament, but it's going to be doing even more in the Converging Wills list that we see here today. So the deck basically plays Excavation of a Legacy to look for a very particular card in your deck. That could be Electra's Training Ground. It could be the token generator here at the bottom next to all the Life Zapper cards. It could be whatever you really want it to be, and just based on all of the ways that this deck functions, you are just removing those cards indefinitely, which then fuels all of your stations here in the side deck. The side deck is a really good way of making sure that you have these big, beefy Chungus boys that come in with enter effects and blow things up. You have a couple of Regalia here because you do have the ways to proc them and reveal them from the sideboard with Life Zapper and Protuberance. And then you just have a ton of these different Solaria Salaria-esque cards. Water, fire, darkness, light, and then, of course, wind as the anti-combo card in the game. Using the sort of progression package here is really useful because you can always shuffle those cards back in. If you draw into a Salaria's Wind or even one of these Solarian Guards of Wind, you're able to just tuck those back in and then you have them once more. In the Magic Stone deck, you have you can run 4 of this really beautiful Rainbow Stone, so you just have access to an Omni Stone as Solaria. There is a lot of fire in the deck. You definitely need fire in order to play Excavation of a Legacy. And then you have access to things like Cascade, which are really helpful to accelerate and protect your game plan overall. Outside of that, he was missing 1 card in his side deck for some reason, but he was playing 3 Muse Staring At, very strong cards still in very particular matchups, and then he has 4 Gradius. Gradius, don't underestimate it, super good. So a very fun card. Still really love Gradius as a 1-drop red answer to things that have that eternal keyword. So congratulations to Christian. Really excited to see what else he can do with this particular deck. And we are going to be moving on here to 4th place as soon as I silence my computer, guys. 4th place went to Dalton Slocum, Ionia's favorite boy. He got into the top 4 with Zeben and Darktree using the Olympians. He really loves Zeus as a deck type, and unfortunately Zeus is not legal. He wants it back very badly, as do most of the folks in team whatever we're called this week. So this is a really interesting package. You're just loading up and you're saying, what are the high utility Olympians that we're going to be running here today? And a lot of that comes down to Persephone being a really good destruction answer and removal option. It also nets you a card and it can put something back into your opponent's hand, so you have natural protection to some degree from Electra, which is your mortal enemy. You also have Ares in here as a really good answer to a lot of different things. You are going to be seeing a lot of Olympians very quickly if you resolve a Tisiphone, so Ares is going to be live very often. If that isn't enough, though, you do have Replicant Kaguya, who is a way of just shutting things down and coming out for relatively cheap. If you need more muscle, you have your Rezard that can also remove things from your opponent's graveyard, very relevant right now, and you can always pull him out with Darktree if you need to, or even just play him with Zeben. Never do that, just play it with Yggdrasil instead, but all of these other cards you can actually use. The other cancel packages you have in here are the Killua Girl in the City, your couple copies of Girion, Lorite, Memory of Worlds, and then you have some Zeben Troopers in here too to stop enter abilities. The other replicants that you are going to be running are Replicant Odin, just as a really solid win con, blow up your opponent's stones, answer this or you lose. Replicant Odin is very good for that. You also have Replicant Alice. Look at the top cards of your deck and put things into the field. They have different costs, which turns out a lot of the Olympians have different costs, so this card coming in and just being a bomb is fantastic. Your draw package is a Borozuki and Gatekeeper of El Savaria. These are the reasons you're playing the stone base you're currently playing here, because if you don't open these up turn 1, you need to rely on Tisiphone. Tisiphone is double black, so you definitely need just all darkness sources from the get-go. Double black is kind of hard to get to otherwise, and so this is just a really helpful thing to have right off the bat. Basically, when he and I sat down and thought about the deck, I just said, like, let's just get you accelerating like crazy. Let's just make sure that your Tisiphone's resolve, your Borozuki's resolve, and your Gatekeeper's resolve, and that's just going to put a lot of pressure on your opponent, because then they're staring down the barrel of a lot of Olympians. What also is really helpful is a Death Scythe. This can help you kind of preserve your Olympians. If they're in the graveyard, you can remove them from the game so they can't get horned. We also have our own horn in case we do want to shuffle our own deck back in to prevent ourselves from dying. This is also why Allosaurus is here. Allosaurus also functions in the sense that you can just play it and then you can grab any of your Olympians from the RFG, and all of a sudden you have an Olympian back in your hand to cast later on in the game. Last but not least, as part of that package is Essence of Athena's Power. This is a really good anti-tech pick for decks like Solaria right now. Just shuffle everything that they have in their RFG back into their graveyard. And yeah, that's going to make things not go very well for them. And you just kind of take over from there. This card actually has a lot of applications. I think there are... this is definitely a slept on card a little bit, but we'll get into that more as we get into my deck list. Spoilers, I'm in this top 8. The side deck, of course, is just more cancel packages. I don't necessarily agree with the Dante here. I think this is for other trees that he might face off against. I'm not entirely sure what to do with that. Other than that, I'm not a huge fan of Dante in this particular list. It feels like an anti-tree deck, anti-tree card to some degree, but to each their own. I'm just gonna... Dalton might be replacing this, I'm not entirely sure. Along with the Regalia, just having an additional thing of like, hey, I can cast this with Zeben to draw me an extra card is really helpful. Girl Staring At, very powerful card. I'd honestly just slot 2 more in over the Dantes here, but this isn't my deck, so we won't go too deep into that. The battle comes to an end is a really good way of just saying you lose, you don't get any more cards, you may proceed to the cry phase. And then the sort of progressions are really good as well because you do have replicants that can shuffle that back in Kaguya. So that's really helpful as well. Congratulations, Dalton. Really proud of you, man. Congratulations for getting into the top 4. We're moving on now to Dan Rowland, who was playing Sherry and Seer. This is just a really strong control deck that tries to get a bunch of treasuries online to do ridiculous things and then burn you to death with things like Moondust Revolution, which is really fun. You're playing a lot of chance standbys. You're doing kind of what Seer has always done alongside her trials. Deck is very solid. I constantly have this on my watch list because of things like Executioner, Prison in the Lunar Lake, and other things that are really hard to interact with in the game. So Magic Stone deck is meant to facilitate that a little bit. I am a little worried that he's only playing two water stones here. That's a little bit of a concern because you need a water stone in order for this to happen, but with Scheherazade, that's a guaranteed first stone for you every single time. So maybe it's not as bad as I think, but I'm still a little hesitant about that, just in case my opponent hooks me or something. That would be really unfortunate. Side deck is just more control stuff. Again, Essence of Athena's power, very powerful, very helpful, setting the stage for Providence to just protect your combo pieces. And then your EX deck is also really solid for just making sure that you always have good treasuries. So congratulations to Dan for getting into top 8. Will Miller is also playing a very similar deck. Played against Will also. I played against both Grim decks, actually. He's playing a little bit of a different package than what Tyler was playing against, but for the most part, you can see the things that are relatively the same. You're seeing the Electras, you're seeing the Cheshire Cat combo here. You're seeing some other things like Liberation of Water, and Solaria's Water, very interesting. A couple of Dark Alices, which is also really fascinating. Lumia's Rage, because he does have the Almerius and the 4 Pure Heart Stones that become Almerius if Almerius is on the field. So this is a very real win condition that you can absolutely play. So a little bit of a different take, but pretty much trying to do the same thing with a few other little goodies in here to make it just different enough to make it very fascinating. Sideboard, of course, Essence of Athena's power. Again, don't underestimate this card. It's very powerful. You got Lumia for aggro matchups, setting the stage to protect your stuff, and Ray Azenbull to cancel enter abilities. And then we get into, well, here, let me congratulate Will before I get too excited. Congratulations, Will, for getting into the top 8. And then we have the fish. We taught the fish to top. Patrick and I definitely approach Olivia very differently, but here we are. There are a couple of things we can agree upon. Aspiring Diva, Rhea Aznable, and Dale are probably just mandatory includes in the deck at this stage. Surging Lightning and Pulsing Thunder are also very much the case, and to get to those cards, you play the Thunder Empress's Strike. We also feel that Electra definitely has a place in the deck going forward. This is basically Terra Thunderfish plus. very good card. And there are certain things that he would take out, as he said, going into his Converging Wills performance as well. So he took out the Replicant Lokis at that point and a couple of Exorcist Mages to make room for some other stuff. And he very nearly topped in his next tournament. So this deck is definitely something to look at. You're playing 4 Aspiring Diva to look for your chance. Things like Surging Lightning, things like your Thunder Empress's Strike. Loki enters the Game of Gods as a way of just making will and drawing additional cards and filling up your graveyard for your perfect Loki and Replicant Loki plays. Muse Staring At is just a really good 2-drop water card to play off a Thunder Empress's Strike and also kind of mess with the meta. Girl Staring At, very powerful card right alongside Exorcist Mage. Your opponent is not cheating things in this particular matchup. And even if they do, Ray Aznable is just going to stop their enters from happening anyway. You have tons of ways of answering things like your opponent having a board of Eternal Things that are really low to the ground because you can just bounce them all back to their hand. You can blow things up with very few cards in hand alongside your Thunder Empress's Strike. Just 2 cards in hand with this card kills an Electra, which is very relevant. And then your mechanical engineer of Ma'at is there to grab your one of Drywing in the sideboard. This is one of the only decks that can actually do this still in the metagame, which I think is really interesting. Any deck can play a mechanical engineer, but this deck has ways to get to it in ways that your opponent may not be expecting, because it is a 2-drop water resonator. So this deck has a very particular way of getting to it in a different way. He is playing Dissonance of Rains and Witch of the Fallen Kingdom in the sideboard here, alongside a couple cracks into the time, as well as Liberation of Water. And he did play a couple of water transformation magics here, and he has 3 unknowns in the side deck that he had to swap in, just because there was a little bit of an issue with the deck list here, but it was resolved. Well into the tournament, it was resolved. So congratulations to Pat for getting into the top 8. And then, oh look, it's me. I played a red Olivia list because I saw things like Lightning Passion and Electra and said, hey, I just kind of lose to Darktree unless I have Electra, so let me just put this in. There are some things that I'm going to be doing a little bit differently going into future lists here, but let's just get into the differences that I have between my list and Pat's. I definitely went all in on Ray Aznable and Electra. I thought this package was really important on the top end, but I'm also playing Fiola as a way of just turn 1 preventing my opponent from doing anything if they want to play like a Regalia or an Addition or a Chant. I think this card probably goes down to 2 cards max in the main board, just as a way of saying, with Thunder Empress Strike, I do have a quote-unquote cancel that can take things off of the chase, and we can put in other cards to make this card to make these slots feel a little bit more impactful. Fiola for me though was really good all day, especially against Grim. Being able to say your Fairy Tale on the chase is going back to the bottom of the deck felt really good. So she still has applications. I just don't think I would play 4 of her. I played, of course, the standard package, 4 Surging Lightning to get around barrier stuff, 4 Thunder Empress's Strike for all of the different modes that are really helpful, 2 Muse Staring At. I really don't like this card at more than 3. This card is very solid, but basically you have 4 copies. If you see 1, you're really playing 2 copies at that point. So the card's really solid, but I'm probably going to put it in the sideboard from here on out, right next to 2 Pulsing Thunder. Again, this felt a little cloggy, and so I wanted to make sure that I had, if I drew 1, I still had 1 in the deck, but other than that, very solid. One of the MVPs was Falchion, Shooting Star of Water. Just putting things back in my opponent's hand in the Grim matchup felt really good for me. He was also really difficult to deal with because I just had a hand full of cards, and that was really, really good against my opponent. I also just have seen this card work miracles in Control Mirrors. So this card being a 2-drop water card is very, very solid. I played the one of Demonfish / Shark, whatever you want to refer to this guy. I just call him Shark because he's, well, quite literally a demon shark, which is really metal. But I never played this card. not once, never felt like I needed it, so I'm probably going to cut it, but it is an option still. It is a really good way of just clearing things for 10 damage, or even just dealing 10 damage to your opponent. Paired really well with Lightning Passion, as I could just deal 10 to my opponent and then just finish things out with Electra, or I could just clear a board or bounce things. I often use the bounce effect on Lightning Passion to just stack my opponent's deck and make that feel really, really icky. I played the one-of Mott as well because I think Dry Weaning is really good, especially against Grim. Being able to just say your Regalia doesn't produce you will, and neither does your Sub-Ruler. That feels really good against that deck. I main boarded 2 Essence of Athena's Power. This card felt really, really good all day. Being able to just say like, hey, I'm going to bring something back from my graveyard, and just saying like, yeah, no, you don't get to do that. I have 6 different stones that allow me to produce black. So this is a really good way for me to just say, yeah, you don't have a graveyard or an RFG anymore. This was one of my answers to Dark Tree. This is one of my answers to if my opponent were trying to bring back something in the Grim deck from the graveyard with like the forest, the Misty Forest. This is a good way of just saying, you don't get to do that. And then again, another card I would probably put more in the sideboard. I mained it just in case I was playing against a lot of wolves. Thought they would be a lot more popular than they are. But these bottom 5 cards here definitely did not impact that matchup because I did not play against any wolves, despite the fact that wolves won the tournament. Either way, this is a very fun card to just say, hey, I'm going to play a 1-drop. No, you're not. No, you're not. Very fun. It also works really well with Aspiring Diva. All of these spells work really well with Aspiring Diva being able to say, hey, all of these are now suddenly free or a 1 cost. So this was very, very, very solid for that particular reason. Magic Stone deck, again, I wanted to see red as often as possible. Technically, all of these stones produce red. So my Electra felt very live very often. 2 Tidal Stones was never really that much of an issue unless I overextended with my Dolly and it died. So then my opponent wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be able to play Electra unless I rolled some dice and see if I got lucky or not, which did happen once and I did get lucky, but I don't like being in that place. Sideboard is, of course, Essence of Athenia, the Bow for Electra, another Muse Staring At. I played Setting the Stage in the sideboard as well, alongside my Liberation of Waters. I put Killua, Girl in the City in the sideboard. I'd actually swap these out and put them in over the Falling into the Crack of Time. At this point, there were times where I was able to draw 5 cards before recovery just because I had Setting the Stage, Killua, and Thunder Empress's Strike in hand, that I was just able to cycle just so many different cards to find my Electra. And when you know, as soon as I did that, I found my Electra and played it against my Dark Tree opponent, and they lost the game. So that was a very good feeling, just being able to say I'm going to cycle all this stuff and look for new cards, and that very much is an option in this list, so I'm moving this into the main board. Other than that, guys, that has been the Ruler School Invitational here. Very fun tournament, and we're going to be seeing more of those as time goes on. Let's move on to the Converging Wills tournament. This won't be nearly as comprehensive just because we've talked a lot about what the decks are doing because they showed up at the Ruler School circuit. Here is your Ruler breakdown. We are looking at the most represented deck here, if I have it correctly, was actually Fault Gold and Seer of the Blue Moon at 4 copies. Everything else was like either 3 or below. We had Friend from Another World, Kaguya. Those are probably going to be your Wolf decks, alongside Killua, Fossil Girl of Melted Ice, and I believe that's it. Yeah, those are the only other 3 copies that we had. We have the regional breakdown here as well. We had a lot of players from the US and a really good situational show up from Europe as well at 18. And at the end of the day, third seed took it. Plot 721 with the Wolf deck. Of course, you're looking at some very similar things. They have some sack outlets here. They have some ways of increasing damage and drawing additional cards, alongside things like your Magic Stone Dance of Chaos that we saw before. They're playing more of a green package, and they're also main decking a couple of Adam Brawley, which is a really silly way of getting your wolves back into the graveyard so they can swing again if you happen to play another moon. Absolutely love where this deck is heading. Once again, Kaguya is such a powerful engine, being able to say, like, hey, a moon came into the field, I'm going to draw a card now. Very strong, right alongside Conflict of Memory and Soul. Very strong card in this particular matchup alongside your Feath Sings, which is, you know, really great because you have a ton, and I mean a ton, of additions. One thing that's missing in here is Godly Aura, and I think that's a very interesting pick to basically just say, like, hey, I'm not going to play that. I'm going to play some other, like, main deck addition moons instead, so I get to play Feath Sing. I think that's a really interesting way of taking it. Of course, the Magic Zone deck is pretty familiar here. And then the side deck, you're seeing 4 of Solaria's Wind, Calamity Shield, Horn of the Sacred Beast. Really good way of messing with your opponent's graveyard right now. A couple of Light Curtains and a couple of Persephones in the control mid-range matchup. Very fun deck. Congratulations to 3rd seed for getting 1st place, and we're moving on then to Evil Bunny Clone. I think this was actually Jeremy Lindley, and this is Matthew Lindley. The Lindley brothers topped, let's just be clear. This Lindley brother played a very different take on Wolves, this time opting to go for Almerius. Turns out you can't get OTK'd if your life is higher than the damage your opponent is anticipating, so 6 stages are not out of the meta yet. They still definitely serve a niche. We're looking into this now. We're making tokens that can swing off your opponent's turn. We have cards that increase your damage output, and Electra to make sure that your opponent's Dark Tree doesn't win the game outright. You're also seeing Raging Messiah to help deal additional burn damage alongside Dodgies and Chivalry's Tears. Dachi is really good for also dumping this dragon in the main deck. You're also playing Wolves as just another mid-range package that can just win things outright if your opponent just doesn't have answers to it. And then Calamity Shield and some other basic support here that's really fun. Reign of Saints coming out of nowhere to just be really, really solid going into the top cut here. Of course, you're playing the Wolf Stones, but you're also playing the Magic Stone of Re-Earth, which is something that can reset itself if you end up doing Judgment of something like your Zero or even your Almerius if Almerius dies. Really solid card. Definitely deserves to see more play because it's very undervalued for what it does. Very solid. And then a couple of Moonshades to round out your mana base. Side deck is pretty solid. You got some aggro elements here. You have your Rogue Spectator Shiva combo, as well as your Kilowas to deal with additions, and your anti-draw card in Curse of Magog. Exorcist Mage is also in the sideboard here, and in the main board. I think I've glossed right over those, but just having more Exorcist Mages in white is really helpful because this deck is not going to be playing Muse Staring At, so why not just put it on a body instead? Anyway, congratulations to the Lindley brothers for taking home top 1 and top 2. That's very solid. Going into this, we had Solaria, who was actually 1st seed. Tissue 69 here is looking at, again, Life Zapper Chrono Gear shenanigans is very, very solid stuff. Playing that alongside the sort of progression package and ways to shuffle those back into the deck. Also just playing all of the different Solaria element edition cards you can just put into the field for free at the start of your turn, which is really helpful. Liberation of Darkness is also really helpful. This is a way for you to pop any of your stuff and bring in your Dusk Girl. There were some really, really weird rulings with this deck in particular, and you know, I'm not going to get too deep into that. They were really technical and very strange. I think we're going to see some clarifications, but regardless of those rulings, I do think Solaria has some potential to really do some really interesting things in this particular environment. So it's good to see Solaria actually topping. I think she's probably one of the only rulers, maybe outside of Arc, that could do this from the 6th set of Hero Cluster. Magic Stone deck, you're running 6 of your Wind Solara sites and 4 of your Rainbow Stones because you are indeed Solaria. And then you get to play 4 of your Falling into the Cracks of Time alongside your stations. Pretty standard stuff here, but being able to go into Dusk Girl, and she just always has Imperishable and can't lose it. Very strong. Just I'm gonna win the game now. Is that cool? Plays Dust Girl. There you go. Going into Subtle and Hero at second seed. Killua. Killua is still a deck. It still has power. Still very good. And now you're starting to see cards that we haven't seen Killua piloting very often. Only playing 2 Divine Lightning, which I think contributed to, although they got into the top 4, at the end of the day, I think that probably would have carried them a little bit farther if they had a full playset of that, but they didn't. So I'm not really sure what to make of that, but Killua is still drawing a ton of cards, still has a lot of really good synergy with green, and playing, obviously, the Wind Moon Child means you get to splash a little bit of blue if you really need to, but this deck is opting not to do that. Instead, it's just going to max out on draw cards, just get a lot of value, and just play kind of a control game, it looks like, is what they're really going for here. Magic Stone deck, it just allows you to yeet your stones to draw cards, but also see the top cards of your deck. So in case you need to yeet a stone to draw a card, you know exactly what you're drawing into, but you definitely have the color combination you need in order to play all of these fun cards up top. In the side deck, you're seeing a pretty standard set of things here. Playing Electra in the sideboard and not in the main board, which I think is a very interesting choice. We are playing the one Fleeter of the Underground Arena to make use of all of these red stones in the mirror match, or even in the control matchup to just kind of overwhelm your opponent as the game goes on. For Sword of Progress, again, it's really interesting that we're not playing this in the main board, but without replicants, it kind of makes sense. It just seems like a really good value card for what Killua wants to be doing right now. We're playing a few Persephones, and he's siding the other 2 Divine Lightning. Again, I would just main board these. This just seems really too good of an opportunity to pass up, so there's got to be a reason they did this, but I'm not quite aware of it. So congratulations though for getting into the top cut for top 4, Subtle and Hero. And we're moving on then to the other Killua deck that top, this time main decking Darkness Moonchild. I think this card is very solid right now, just being able to pop anything that your opponent wants to do. If they want to establish anything on board, they got to do some, they got to go through some hoops to try and get around this guy. We are playing for Divine Lightning here, as well as a lot of other Killua support maxed out, which I think is probably the way to go. What we're not seeing, though, is what we did see up here. I forget what this card is called, but basically it allows you to just draw 2 at quick cast speed, which I think is definitely missing in this list. Excuse me. But, you know, at the same time, there's a lot of really just good value cards in here already. It might have just been a playstyle preference. We have a really solid cancel package, 4 Conflict, 3 Fair Spell, 3 Geary, and 4 Lorite. Good luck. That is a wall that you're going to have to get through alongside Divine Lightning as a cancel option. That's really good. Chivalry's Tears is just kind of remove these extra bulk cards in your hand to just deal a bunch of damage, close out damage, or even just get rid of your opponent's field as you're swinging in. 3 Lucifers as a way of just like looping and making sure your opponent doesn't have life or cards to fight back against you. And then the main boarded Electra to just seal out games. I think this is a really solid list. Very cool to see. We are playing 4 Moonshades as a way of just saying I have access to other colors as needed, and you can see how that impacts the sideboard options here. You definitely have access to things like Lucifer or Girian's Destruction Effect, but in the sideboard you also have options to go into Muse Staring At, Setting the Stage for Providence, and the Lumia package to make sure that your opponent's wolves go bye-bye forever. Very solid. Really like this list in particular. Maybe some main deck options is something I would change personally, but this deck looks pretty stable overall, and it's good to see that Killua is actually still capable of doing some really good things in this post-hero cluster environment. Maroka is here with 5th seed going into the top 8 here. Lumia Sherry, very solid, just control strategy with all of the cards I can't pronounce, I'm not even going to try. But there is a really nice interaction between your Darkness Resonator and Dark Alice, because you can just opt to try and sack it, and you just draw 2 cards and remove a couple of cards instead. So your Dark Alices turn into +4s, essentially. You're ramping yourself, quote unquote, 2 cards into your RFG. to use with Aslan, which comes in because you have Lumia available to you. You're also able to play things that you remove with Conflict of Memory and Soul, or if you opt to play the Sword of Progression package instead, that is also a way of just reusing them with Lumia once you flip her. Other than that, there's an alternative win condition baked into this with the Layla cards. Alf Layla and Wa Layla are here to just make sure that in the event that the game has to go long, you are going to eventually win that struggle. They're playing for Magic Stone of Moonlight, which I think is really fascinating to play because you can just get your Pure Heart Stone right off the top, and then you just have access to all of it at all times, and your Moonlight just copies that stuff. Going into the side deck, then, you just have things like Lumia's Rage as an alternate win con. You do have the Almeria Stone, so you are able to just say, hey, I have all these Almeria Stones and all of these cards in the RFG. I'm just going to burn you to death now. That's very much a thing. And then, of course, you have Muse Staring At and Falling Into the Cracks to take care of the Wolf matchup. Light Curtain is also there for anti-aggro purposes, and then your standard side deck package for this particular deck. Very fun. I love seeing this deck. It's actually something I've been a little scared of because the ability for you to just constantly recycle things is a little ridiculous, and Lumia just being able to say, hey, I have a second hand now, is that okay? It's very fun, very crazy deck, and so congratulations to Maroka for getting into the top cut. We're looking next at Alice Bahamut. This is a burn deck, hands down. Let's use Dodgy to dump things that then burn you a whole bunch of damage and prevent you, if you gained any life, well, not anymore. Bahamut is a really good engine to just look out for any of your dragons in the main deck. You have things like Electra to close out games, but you also have ways of just dumping cards into the grave, recovering spirits, and a whole host of other things. This is a very fun deck, especially if you're able to pop your Alice with Spark of Life. That's a really good way of making sure your opponent just, you just have interaction for your opponent's stuff. Very flexible card, very solid card in general. And then you just have Disruption, and a way of giving yourself Eternal if need be. We're looking at Pure Heart Stone, Moonlight, stop me if you've heard this before. The couple of tech picks, because you are playing your Electra, your Spectator Shiva combo, Cascades for just more interaction, Rumsfeld to shut down your opponent's stuff, which I think is a very interesting choice considering you are a tag combination. I'm not sure if you would want to stop your own stuff from going off, but in the event that you just have your sub-ruler and you're just shuffling your deck more and more, this might be a way of just saying, like, I'm just going to get pure value and you're not going to get any value from your stuff. Seems a little risky to me. I wonder if they brought that stuff in at all. Hellfire the Demonic World to get rid of their Rumsfeld stuff or any of their other stuff using Lars. A way of making sure that you continue the game with Horn, and then for Damascus Moon to just say, your stuff doesn't work anymore. Good luck, have fun. Next up, we have Quantum Physics. I believe this is Stephen Holsheiser with his Turbo Pandora. We don't have a lot to say here, but we do have a lot of relics that come into the field, and you can either just just out combo your opponent, or even just make it so that your Boxes of Despair and Hope are the way you end up winning this game. Although, if I understand things correctly, he's not often doing the alternate win con. He's actually just muscling them out of card advantage. Magic Stones, stop me if you've seen these before. In the side deck, there's a lot of very similar things here. One of the things that he's citing, which I think is really helpful, is Roamer. Roamer is very good. I prefer that much over Curse of Magog. Unless you are locked into white, I think you'd be playing Roamer every single time. And so for that particular reason, I really appreciate this. He's also got some Lumias in the sideboard as well, and that is going to round off our top 8. So guys, let me know what you think of these two tournaments down in the comment section down below. Very different tournaments, very different turnouts in general. Converging Wills essentially was a GP level event. There were a lot of different things that you could do in this tournament, and there were very wide spread of rulers. But let me know what you all think down in the comment section down below. While you're there, hit the subscribe button and ring that bell for more tournament reports, feature matches, and everything else here. Don't forget to look at rulerschooltcg.com for any of your one-stop shop needs for Force of Will. We are constantly adding to this site, so make sure that you can make it over there as often as you can. Anyway, guys, this has been Paul. Let us know how things are going in your Force of Will world. And until next time, this has been Paul, signing off.